My name is Alexandra Chen, but everyone calls me Alec. I'm a 29-year-old software architect who just landed a 7-figure contract with a major tech company for my cybersecurity framework. It was the culmination of 3 years of sleepless nights, countless rejections, and an unwavering belief in my approach to network protection that many industry veterans dismissed as too unconventional. But last week, when the CEO of TechGuard Solutions called me personally to say my framework was exactly what they'd been searching for, those doubts finally melted away. It wasn't just the money, though I won't pretend that $2.8 million didn't matter. It was the validation that my unorthodox methods actually worked better than the traditional approaches everyone told me to follow. My family, however, has always had a different perspective on my career choices. Computers are for boys who can't play sports, my father would say when I was coding instead of joining my sister Melissa's cheerleading practices. Why waste time on those video games when you could be learning something practical? My mother would echo, despite my attempts to explain that I was building software, not playing games. Even when I graduated top of my class from MIT, my parents' focus was on why I hadn't followed Melissa into business school or found a nice man to settle down with like she had. Their dismissal of my passion has been the constant backdrop of my life, a persistent hum of disappointment that I've never been able to fully tune out. What my family doesn't know is that I've been selected as a key speaker at the International Cybersecurity Summit next month, an honor usually reserved for veterans with decades in the field. And what they really don't know is that I recently discovered something that explains their lifetime of favoritism toward my sister, financial records showing they've been systematically depleting my college savings account, money my late grandfather earmarked specifically for me to fund my sister's lifestyle. The most recent withdrawal, a staggering $43,000 for Melissa's upcoming wedding to Bradley, a financial advisor whose credentials seemed questionable at best. I found the transfer documents when I was gathering paperwork for my business loan application, and the discovery left me frozen in disbelief, staring at my laptop screen while years of memories suddenly clicked into horrifying focus. Have you ever given everything you had to earn someone's approval, only to realize they've been actively undermining you the entire time? How do you reconcile the family who raised you with the family who betrayed you? And at what point do you stop seeking validation from people who will never truly see your worth? From the outside, the Chen family appears to be the quintessential American success story. My father, Richard Chen, is a respected cardiothoracic surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, while my mother, Diana, serves on the boards of several prestigious Boston charities. Our family photos show perfectly coordinated outfits at galas and fundraisers, generous donations to community initiatives, and proud parents flanking their 2 daughters, one in a business suit, one, reluctantly, in a cocktail dress, at various awards ceremonies. We're the family other immigrants point to when they talk about achieving the American dream, from my grandparents arriving with nothing after fleeing China during the Revolution, to my parents' professional achievements and Ivy League educations. For both daughters, the Chens, living proof that hard work and family values lead to success in America. Behind closed doors, the reality is starkly different. My father is a man driven by appearances and status, viewing his children primarily as extensions of his own success narrative. With Melissa, that narrative is perfect. She followed his prescribed path, went to Wharton for her MBA after her undergraduate business degree, and became engaged to Bradley Thompson, whose family runs a successful investment firm with the right connections. With me, he sees a disappointing deviation, despite my accomplishments. Alexandra could have been anything, he'll say to relatives, as if being a software architect with multiple patents is being nothing. He's mastered the art of the backhanded compliment. She's so smart with those computer things. Imagine what she could accomplish if she applied herself to something important. My successes are dismissed as quirky hobbies while my sister's most minor achievements are celebrated with champagne dinner. My mother is a more complex figure in this dynamic. A former concert pianist who gave up her performing career when she married my father, she alternates between passive endorsement of his favoritism and quiet moments of connection with me. Sometimes, when Dad is at the hospital for overnight shifts, she'll slip into my old room when I'm visiting and ask about my projects. She'll listen with genuine interest as I explain encryption algorithms or network architecture, only to revert to dismissive comments about finding a real career when my father returns. I've wondered if she sees in me the independence she surrendered, creating a complicated mix of pride and resentment. She's trapped in my father's orbit, and her occasional kindness makes her complicity in his behavior all the more painful. Melissa, my sister, has perfected the role of golden child. 2 years older than me, she's beautiful, sociable, and strategic, always knowing exactly what to say to please our parents. While she's never been overtly cruel, she's mastered the art of subtle undermining. Alex is so brave to wear that to dinner. Or, it's amazing how Alex can focus on computers for hours. I could never be that isolated. She accepts our parents' preferential treatment as her birthright, including the lavish funding for her lifestyle. Her fiancé Bradley fits perfectly into the family dynamic, charming in public, calculating in private. I've caught him eyeing my father's art collection with an appraiser's gaze more than once, and his sudden interest in getting to know his future sister-in-law better coincided suspiciously with the announcement of my contract. Then there's my grandfather, my father's father, who passed away 5 years ago. Unlike my father, Grandfather Zhang had quietly encouraged my interest in technology. When I was 11, I found an old computer in his garage and spent hours fixing it. Instead of telling me to go play outside like my parents would have, he watched with fascination, occasionally asking questions. The next week, he took me to an electronics store and bought me parts to build my own computer. "Your mind works differently, Xiaolon," he'd say, using my Chinese name. "That is not a weakness, it is a strength." When I was accepted to MIT, he established a college fund for me, separate from the family account. "For your education and future," he said, "your path may not be the same as your sister's, but it is just as valuable." He was the only one who came to my first hackathon competition. I found him afterward, wiping tears of pride from his eyes while my parents were attending one of Melissa's business school networking events. 2 years ago, during Thanksgiving dinner, I made what I thought would be a breakthrough moment with my family. I had just secured a patent for a new encryption method, and I brought the frame certificate to show everyone. I spent hours rehearsing how to explain its significance in layman's terms, hoping they would finally understand the importance of my work. I even went so far as to have my invention featured in a small article in the Boston Globe's technology section, thinking the external validation might help. As I excitedly placed the newspaper and framed patent on the dinner table, my mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, dear," before turning to my sister to ask about her latest promotion. My father didn't even look up from his turkey. Melissa gave me a pitying smile before launching into a story about her new corner office. The newspaper was eventually used to wrap leftover cranberry sauce, and the patent now hangs in my home office, a reminder that no achievement of mine would ever be enough. It was just last week, while gathering financial records for my business loan application, that I stumbled upon the truth that would change everything. I needed proof of my assets, including the college fund my grandfather had established for me. When I contacted the bank, they seemed confused. The account had been nearly depleted. Pushing for answers, they sent me transaction records showing systematic withdrawals over the past 3 years, all authorized by my parents as co-trustees. The most recent withdrawal, $43,000 made just 2 weeks ago, had a memo line reading, "Melissa Wedding, 4 Seasons deposit." I felt physically ill as I scrolled through years of withdrawals. Melissa's MBA fees, Melissa's apartment security deposit, Melissa's car down payment. There were dozens of transactions, each one a betrayal, each one explaining how my sister afforded her lavish lifestyle despite her modest starting salary. The account that was supposed to contain over $200,000 for my education and future now held barely $17,000. I sat in stunned silence in my apartment, the truth hitting me like a physical blow. They hadn't just favored my sister, they had actively stolen from me to give to her. My sister's engagement party was scheduled for this weekend at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, a lavish affair with over 200 guests, including my father's hospital colleagues, my mother's charity connections, and a surprising number of my sister's closest friends, whom I never heard her mention before. I spent the week in a fog, trying to process the discovered betrayal while simultaneously preparing to face my family. I deliberated over what to wear, finally selecting a tailored black pantsuit that made me feel armored rather than the floral dress my mother had suggested I wear to look more approachable. I debated whether to bring the bank statements, tucking them into my clutch and removing them at least 5 times before finally deciding to keep them with me, not as an ambush weapon, but as a talisman, a physical reminder that I wasn't imagining things, that my suspicions of unfair treatment had concrete evidence. The ballroom was decorated in white and gold, with champagne flowing freely and a string quartet playing in the corner. When I arrived, my mother immediately noticed my outfit choice. "Alexandra, we discussed this," she whispered through a frozen smile as she air-kissed my cheek. "Would it have killed you to wear something feminine for one? It's your sister's special day." My father simply nodded in my direction before returning to a conversation with Bradley's father about golf memberships. Melissa, resplendent in a champagne-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, squealed when she saw me. "Alex, you came," she exclaimed, as if my attendance at a family event was a pleasant surprise rather than an expectation. She hugged me tightly, then whispered, "Couldn't find a dress that fit the tech girl budget?" before pulling away with a tinkling laugh that made it sound like a joke rather than the barb it was. I forced a smile, suddenly hyper-aware that her diamond engagement ring probably cost more than what remained in my dwindling college fund. Not everyone at the party was part of the familial frost, however. My Aunt Lily, my mother's younger sister and a professor of comparative literature at Boston University, sought me out almost immediately. "You look like you're attending a funeral," not an engagement party," she said bluntly, handing me a glass of champagne. "Though I suppose with Bradley joining the family, we might be mourning the death of integrity." I nearly choked on my drink, surprised by her candor. Aunt Lily had always been the family iconoclast, unmarried, outspoken, and generally considered a mild embarrassment by my status-conscious parents. "I read about your contract in the tech newsletter," she continued. "Incredible achievement. Your grandfather would have been bursting with pride." Her sincere acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Across the room, I noticed my mother watching our interaction with a pinched expression. As dinner progressed, I found myself observing my family with a newfound clarity. From my seat at the far end of the family table, as far from the spotlight as possible without being relegated to the children's section, I watched the performance unfold. My father beamed as he introduced Bradley to his colleagues as my future son-in-law, taking over the Thompson investment firm next year. My mother fluttered between tables, accepting congratulations as if her daughter's engagement was her personal accomplishment. Melissa played her part perfectly, appearing gracious and humble while simultaneously ensuring everyone knew about their planned honeymoon in the Maldives. I watched Bradley charming an elderly great-aunt, noting how his attention intensified when he discovered she owned property in Nantucket. And I observed myself, the outsider, carrying the weight of a secret that could collapse this carefully constructed facade like a house of cards. The bank statements in my clutch felt like they were burning a hole through the fabric. Throughout the evening, the microaggressions accumulated like paper cuts. During his welcome speech, my father thanked everyone for coming to celebrate our daughter, singular, finding happiness, as if I didn't exist. When a family friend asked what I did for work, my mother interrupted before I could answer. "Oh, Alexandra does something with computers." "Melissa, tell Dr. Kaplan about your new position at Thompson Investments." At the dessert table, my cousin innocently asked if I would be Melissa's maid of honor. Before I could respond, my sister swooped in with, "Oh, Alex is so busy with her little coding job. I wouldn't want to burden her with wedding responsibilities when she's still trying to establish herself professionally." The patronizing pat on my arm that accompanied this statement made my skin crawl. Later, when conversation turned to the wedding venue, the Four Seasons Boston, naturally, I couldn't help but mentally calculate that the deposit my parents had taken from my account would cover the flowers alone. The breaking point came during the gift opening portion of the evening. My parents had purchased a weekend getaway to Martha's Vineyard for the couple, presented in an envelope with a watercolor painting of the island. Bradley's parents gifted them crystal champagne flutes and a promise of a down payment on a house in Beacon Hill. When it was my turn, I presented them with what I could afford, a handcrafted photo album I'd spent weeks designing, with space for wedding photos and mementos. Melissa opened it, gave a tight smile, and said, "How creative. I guess when you can't spend much, you have to get crafty." The subtle emphasis on can't spend much made several guests shift uncomfortably. My father quickly interjected, "That's our Alexandra, always the artistic one," as if my career in cutting-edge technology was equivalent to a child's finger painting. Bradley barely glanced at the gift before setting it aside for the next package, a weekend spa retreat from one of Melissa's college friends. I watched my carefully created album disappear under a pile of expensive presents, a perfect metaphor for my place in the family. The toasts began around 9 o'clock, with the crystal tinkling of spoons against champagne glasses summoning attention. Bradley's father went first, a practiced speech about welcoming Melissa to their family with open arms. My mother followed with an emotional tribute to her perfect daughter, finding her perfect match. Then my father stood, commanding the room with the same authoritative presence he wielded in the operating room. "When Melissa was born," he began, "I knew she was destined for greatness. She has never disappointed us." Valedictorian, Wharton MBA, and now a rising star at one of Boston's premier financial institutions. He raised his glass higher. "To my daughter, who has fulfilled every dream a father could have. And to Bradley, a man worthy of her brilliance and beauty." The room erupted in applause as they clinked glasses. I sat perfectly still, waiting for some acknowledgement of his other daughter, perhaps a mention of my recent contract, or even a generic comment about being proud of both his children. It never came. Instead, he continued, "Diana and I have always prioritized family above all else. That's why we're thrilled to announce our wedding gift to the couple. We're covering the entire cost of their Four Seasons wedding and the honeymoon in the Maldives." The crowd gasped appreciatively at such generosity. "Nothing is too good for our Melissa," he concluded, as my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Something shifted inside me in that moment, a tectonic plate movement of the soul. The half-empty champagne glass in my hand suddenly felt too fragile, too delicate to contain the seismic rage building within me. I realized I was done seeking approval from people who had not only failed to support me but had actively undermined me by stealing what was rightfully mine. With trembling fingers, I reached into my clutch and withdrew the bank statements I'd brought with me. The paper felt substantial in my hands, tangible evidence of years of betrayal. As the applause for my father's speech faded and Bradley stood to give his response, I rose from my seat. "I'd like to make a toast as well," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. My mother's eyes widened in alarm. I had deviated from the script. Improvisation was not part of the Chen family performance. "To my sister and Bradley," I began, raising my glass with a steady hand that belied my racing heart. "Congratulations on your engagement and your upcoming wedding at the Four Seasons." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room. "It's a beautiful venue. I know because I've apparently paid for a significant portion of it." A confused murmur rippled through the guests. My father's face darkened, a storm gathering. "Alexandra," my mother hissed, "sit down." I ignored her. "You see, I recently discovered something interesting when preparing documentation for my business loan. The college fund that my grandfather established for me, the one he specifically created to support my education and future, has been systematically emptied over the past 3 years. I held up the bank statements, and the most recent withdrawal of $43,000 was made 2 weeks ago for, and I quote, "Melissa Wedding, Four Seasons deposit." The room had gone completely silent. Melissa's perfect smile had frozen on her face, while Bradley looked between my father and me with calculating eyes. "So, here's to family priorities," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Here's to my parents, who stole from one daughter to finance the other's dreams." I locked eyes with my father. "Here's to the man who taught me that no matter what I achieve, a degree from MIT, multiple patents, or a multi-million-dollar contract, I will never be worth as much as my sister." I turned to my mother. "And here's to the woman who stood by and watched it happen, occasionally feeling bad about it, but never enough to stop it." I set my untouched toast champagne on the table and pulled out a manila envelope from my clutch. "This is a copy of my contract with TechGuard Solutions, $2.8 million for my cybersecurity framework. I thought you should have it, since you've been so concerned about my financial future. Clearly, I need to keep better track of my assets from now on." I placed the envelope on the gift table. "And this," I said, placing the bank statements beside it, "is for anyone who wonders why I won't be contributing further to the wedding expenses." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with deliberate movements, I retrieved the photo album I had made, the gift that had been so quickly discarded. "I spent weeks on this," I said, my voice softer now. "Not because I couldn't afford something expensive, but because I thought it would mean more. Clearly, I was wrong about what matters in this family." I tucked the album under my arm and straightened my shoulders. "Congratulations again on your engagement. I wish you both exactly what you deserve." With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. Behind me, chaos erupted. I heard my mother's voice, shrill with panic. "It's just a misunderstanding." My father's deeper tones, "Alexandra, get back here immediately." Melissa's tearful protests, "You're ruining my engagement party." But the voice that cut through most clearly was Aunt Lily's delighted laugh and her comment, "Well, it's about damn time." In the grand foyer of the Fairmont, I paused to collect myself. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash beginning. I heard rapid footsteps behind me and turned to see my father approaching, his face contorted with rage. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink under his gaze. "How dare you," he seethed, keeping his voice low to avoid attracting attention from the hotel staff. "How dare you embarrass this family in front of everyone who matters in Boston?" I noticed his concern wasn't for the theft I'd exposed, but for the public revelation of it. "How dare I repeated incredulously. "You stole over $180,000 from me, money that grandfather specifically left for my future, and you're upset about embarrassment?" He dismissed this with a wave of his hand. "That money was always meant for family needs. Your grandfather would have understood that Melissa's education and wedding were priorities." The casual way he rewrote my grandfather's intention felt like another betrayal. "Grandfather believed in me when no one else did," I said quietly. "He would be ashamed of what you've done." Something flickered in my father's eyes, perhaps the first hint of doubt I'd ever seen there. But it was quickly replaced by cold fury. "You will apologize to your sister and her fiancé, and you will tell everyone that this was a misunderstanding," he demanded. I shook my head. "No, Dad. I'm done pretending. I'm done seeking your approval, and I'm done funding Melissa's life at the expense of my own." I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me. "If you walk out that door, you are no longer part of this family." I looked back at him over my shoulder. "I haven't been part of this family for a long time. The difference is, now I'm okay with that." And with that, I pushed through the revolving doors into the cool Boston night, leaving behind the suffocating weight of familial expectations. The aftermath of my public revelation was immediate and chaotic. My phone exploded with notifications, text messages, voicemails, emails, and social media alerts. My parents' damage control strategy was twofold: my father left threatening voicemails about legal consequences for defamation and family privacy violations, while my mother alternated between tearful pleas to fix this before people talk and guilt trips about destroying your sister's special time. Melissa sent a single text. I hope you're happy with yourself. Bradley's parents are reconsidering the prenup terms because of you. Several extended family members and family friends reached out with mixed reactions. Some expressed shock and sympathy, while others admonished me for airing private family matters in public. The most surprising messages came from cousins and even a few of my parents' friends who confessed they had always noticed the disparity in how we were treated but had never felt it was their place to say anything. An email from Dr. Kaplan, my father's colleague, simply read, "Your grandfather Zhang would be proud. He often spoke of your brilliance to me." 3 days after the engagement party, I was working from my apartment when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Aunt Lily holding a bottle of expensive scotch and wearing a mischievous grin. "I thought you might need this after throwing the equivalent of a nuclear bomb into the Chen family dynasty," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. As she poured us each a generous measure, she revealed that she had suspected something was amiss with my grandfather's provisions for years. "Your grandfather told me about the fund he set up for you," she explained, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "He was so proud of your independence. When your mother mentioned paying for Melissa's MBA with family funds, I questioned it, but Diana brushed me off." Lily took a long sip of her scotch. "Zhang and I were always the black sheep. Him for maintaining Chinese traditions your father found embarrassing, me for refusing to marry some doctor and produce grandchildren. We understood each other." She pulled a small, worn journal from her bag. "He asked me to give you this if I ever felt you needed it. I think that time is now." The journal, written in my grandfather's precise handwriting, detailed his observations of the family dynamics over years, including his concerns about my parents' favoritism and his hopes for my future. The final entry, dated just weeks before his death, read, "Alexandra embodies the true Chen spirit, innovative, resilient, and unwilling to follow merely because others lead. The others have forgotten what it means to forge your own path." She remembers. My company's COO called me into her office the following Monday, and I briefly feared that the family drama had somehow affected my professional standing. Instead, she informed me that news of my framework had spread through the industry grapevine, and 3 additional companies had expressed interest in licensing it. "Whatever personal storms you're weathering," she said, "your work speaks for itself." The validation from my professional community stood in stark contrast to my family's dismissal of my achievements. That same day, I received an email from my bank notifying me that a wire transfer of $43,000 had been deposited into my account. The sender information listed Bradley Thompson, with a terse note, "Returning wedding venue funds. Not interested in starting our marriage with stolen money." I sat back in my chair, surprised by this unexpected display of integrity from my sister's fiancé. Perhaps there was more to him than I had assumed, or perhaps he simply understood that financial impropriety could damage his carefully cultivated image in Boston's business circle. Either way, the return of the money felt like the first acknowledgement that a wrong had been committed. 2 weeks after the engagement party, I hired a forensic accountant to investigate the full extent of the financial misappropriation. The results were worse than I had initially discovered. Beyond the depletion of my college fund, my father had used my social security number to open several credit cards in my name during my college years, charging expenses related to Melissa's study abroad program and first apartment. He had also taken out a personal loan using my information shortly after I graduated from MIT. The total financial impact approached $300,000. Including interest and fees. When confronted with this evidence by my attorney, my father's response was breathtaking in its entitlement. "I gave her life and paid for her upbringing. Everything I did was for this family's benefit." In his mind, my identity and resources were simply extensions of his own, to be allocated as he saw fit. My grandfather, with his emphasis on my independence and individual worth, had represented a worldview fundamentally at odds with my father's patriarchal approach to family. The contrast between my grandfather's vision for me and my parents' treatment was thrown into sharp relief as I read through his journal. Where my father saw my interest in technology as a phase to be outgrown, my grandfather had recognized it as a calling. Where my mother viewed my independence as a failure to conform to feminine ideals, my grandfather had celebrated it as strength of character. "Alexandra sees patterns where others see chaos," he had written after watching me debug a program. When I was 16, Richard dismisses this as playing with toys, but I recognize a mind that will build the future. The journal revealed that he had intentionally structured my fund to protect it from my parents' control, but after his death, my father had exploited a technical loophole in the trust document to gain co-trustee status. This discovery was both painful and healing, confirmation that I had not imagined the disparity in treatment but also evidence that someone had truly seen and valued me for exactly who I was. As part of my healing process, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that the favoritism and financial exploitation were symptoms of deeper dysfunctional patterns. Your parents' behavior reflects their own insecurities and rigid beliefs about success and family roles, she explained. Your sister became the repository for their dreams and expectations, while you represented the independence they feared. Through therapy, I began to see how my lifelong quest for my parents' approval had shaped my decisions and undermined my self-worth despite my external success. I realized that even my career achievements had been partly motivated by a desire to prove my value to people who were fundamentally incapable of acknowledging it. Dr. Martinez encouraged me to redirect that energy toward building a life that reflected my own values rather than a reaction to my parents' rejection. The opposite of seeking their approval isn't rejecting everything they stand for, she said. It's deciding for yourself what matters to you. The photo album I had reclaimed from the engagement party sat on my coffee table for weeks, a painful reminder of misplaced hope. Initially, I considered destroying it, burning it as a symbolic severing of ties with my family. Instead, inspired by a suggestion from Dr. Martinez, I decided to repurpose it. I removed the wedding-themed elements and began filling it with mementos of my own journey, my MIT acceptance letter, photos from the hackathon my grandfather had attended, the patent certificate my family had ignored, press clippings about my framework, and pictures of the people who had truly supported me along the way. The final page held a photo of my grandfather and me on my college graduation day, his pride evident in his gentle smile. Beneath it, I pasted his words from the journal. Remember, Shaolon, your worth is not measured by others' recognition, but by the courage with which you follow your own path. The album transformed from a rejected gift into a testament to my resilience and a reminder of the legacy that truly mattered to me. Over the following months, I began to redefine family on my own terms. Aunt Lily became a regular presence in my life, dropping by with takeout and stories about my grandfather that my parents had never shared. My COO, Janelle, introduced me to her tech industry women's group, where I found mentors and peers who valued my contributions without qualification. My college roommate Rebecca, who had remained a steadfast friend despite our busy lives, helped me furnish my new condominium. After I decided to move from my apartment to make a fresh start, even my neighbor Mrs. Patel, who had initially just been the woman who collected my mail when I traveled, became something of a surrogate grandmother figure, teaching me to cook her family recipes and listening to my work challenges with genuine interest. These connections lacked the biological ties that supposedly defined family, but they offered the unconditional support and celebration of my authentic self that my parents never had. As Aunt Lily put it over dumplings one evening, family isn't who shares your DNA, it's who shares your journey. The unexpected twist came 3 months after the engagement party, when Bradley Thompson arrived at my office unannounced. My assistant showed him in with a confused expression. She knew enough about my family situation to recognize the name. Bradley looked different from how I remembered him at family functions. Less polished, more human somehow. I called off the engagement, he said without preamble, sitting heavily in the chair across from my desk. After what happened, after what I learned about how your parents treated you, I started questioning everything. He explained that he had begun investigating the Thompson family business practices at his father's firm and discovered similar patterns of ethical compromises disguised as pragmatic business decisions. Your courage to stand up to your family made me realize I was about to marry into exactly the same kind of situation and perpetuate it, he said. Melissa was furious, of course. Your parents even more. So, the Chens and Thompsons were supposed to be the perfect Boston Power merger. He gave a humorless laugh. I've been cut off financially, but I'm actually starting my own financial advisory practice focused on ethical investing. As he left, he handed me an invitation to the opening of his new office. No pressure to come, he said, but I wanted you to know that your stand that night changed more than just your own life. It made me question mine. It's been almost a year since that night at the Fairmont Copley Plaza when I finally stood up for myself. The contract with TechGuard Solutions has expanded to include 2 additional frameworks, and my company has promoted me to Chief Security Architect with a team of 12 brilliant developers under my leadership. Last month, I delivered the keynote address at the International Cybersecurity Summit, the same opportunity I'd known about but hadn't shared with my family before our confrontation. Standing on that stage, looking out at an audience of industry leaders who had gathered specifically to hear my ideas, I felt a profound sense of validation that had nothing to do with proving my worth to my parents. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was being valued for exactly who I am, not measured against who someone else wanted me to be. My relationship with my biological family remains complicated. My father has not spoken to me since the night of the engagement party, maintaining that I betrayed the family by making private matters public. My mother occasionally sends carefully worded text messages that dance around any meaningful acknowledgement of what happened, focusing instead on superficial pleasantries and subtle attempts to draw me back into the fold without addressing the underlying issue. Your father is too proud to say it, but he misses you, she wrote recently, without any mention of the financial theft or years of favoritism. Melissa and I had one brief, tense coffee meeting 3 months ago, facilitated by Aunt Lily. My sister vacillated between defensive justifications, I didn't know where the money was coming from, and bitter accusations, you always had to be different, to make everything difficult. When I pointed out that she was now experiencing some of the financial constraints I'd lived with for years, she left abruptly. The conversation confirmed what I had slowly come to accept. The narrative of our family was too deeply entrenched for most of its members to rewrite, regardless of the evidence. The $43,000 that Bradley returned, along with the settlement I eventually received from my parents after my attorney presented the evidence of financial misappropriation, became the seed money for what I now consider my most important project. The Zhang Chen Technology Scholarship provides financial support and mentorship to young women from immigrant families pursuing degrees in computer science and cybersecurity. The first cohort of 5 scholars will begin their studies this fall, each receiving not just funding but access to a network of professional women in tech who have volunteered to serve as mentors. My grandfather's journal sits in a place of honor in my home office, and excerpts from his writings form the core of the scholarship's mission statement, to recognize those who see patterns where others see chaos, and to nurture the minds that will build our future. It feels right that the money that was taken from me will now help others forge their own paths, free from the financial constraints that can make independence so difficult to achieve. The process of rebuilding my sense of self-worth has been neither linear nor easy. There are still days when I catch myself seeking validation in unhealthy ways or defining my success in terms my father would recognize. Dr. Martinez has helped me understand that these patterns, established over decades, don't disappear overnight. The difference is that I now recognize them when they emerge. I've learned to listen to my internal voice rather than the echoes of my parents' judgments. I've discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I've realized that forgiveness of my parents, my sister, and myself doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means releasing the power those events have over my present and future. As my grandfather wrote, true resilience is not never falling. It is rising each time with greater wisdom. The expanded definition of family I've embraced has brought unexpected joy and support into my life. Last Thanksgiving, instead of the tense, performative gathering at my parents' Beacon Hill brownstone, I hosted dinner in my new condominium. Around my table sat Aunt Lily, recounting scandalous family stories with gleeful disregard for propriety. Janelle and her wife, deep in conversation with Rebecca about sustainable investing. Mrs. Patel, insisting everyone try her fusion turkey recipe with Indian spices. And, surprisingly, Bradley, who has become something of a friend as we both navigate our new, more authentic life. The conversation flowed naturally from technology to politics to personal stories, without the rigid hierarchy and tension that had characterized family gatherings throughout my childhood. As I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, and whom I had chosen in return, I realized that this was what family should feel like, a place of acceptance, celebration, and mutual support. What I've come to understand most profoundly is that the validation we seek from others, particularly from those who have shown themselves incapable of providing it, is a poor substitute for self-acceptance. My grandfather saw my value when no one else did, but even his recognition wasn't enough to overcome the damage of my parents' persistent dismissal. It wasn't until I stood up in that ballroom and declared my own worth that I truly began to believe in it myself. The journey from that moment to where I am now hasn't been about proving my parents wrong, though the evidence suggests they were, but about discovering who I am when I'm not defined by their expectations or limitations. I've learned that my unconventional approach to problem solving, my attention to detail, my persistence in the face of challenges, traits my family often criticized as stubborn or obsessive, are precisely what make me successful in my field and valued by the people who now surround me. The most unexpected development came just last week, when I received an email from my father's hospital colleague, Dr. Kaplan. He explained that he had been my grandfather's physician and confidant in his final years. Your grandfather worried constantly about the dynamics in your family, he wrote. He knew Richard favored Melissa and feared what would happen to you once he was gone. Before he passed, he asked me to keep an eye on you from a distance and to intervene if I ever saw you truly in danger. When you stood up at that engagement party, I knew his fears had been justified, but I also knew you had found your strength. He would be immensely proud of the woman you've become. Attached to the email was a photograph I'd never seen before. My grandfather, as a young man in China, standing before a rudimentary computer system in what appeared to be a university setting. On the back, written in faded ink, were characters that translated to "finding patterns in chaos, the family legacy." All this time, I had believed I was the deviation from the Chen family path, when in reality, I was continuing a legacy that had been obscured but never erased. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, know that you're not alone. So many of us struggle with family dynamics that undermine rather than support our authentic self. We twist ourselves into shapes that might finally earn the love or recognition we crave, only to discover that the cost of that contortion is our own well-being and truth. If you're in that place now, searching for validation from people who cannot or will not provide it, I want you to hear what took me too long to understand. Your worth is inherent. It does not depend on another person's ability to recognize it. The path to healing begins when you start to value yourself enough to question the narratives that have been imposed upon you, and to create boundaries that protect your right to self-definition. Your journey of rediscovering your worth might look different from mine. It might involve confrontation, or it might require quiet distance. It might mean building a new family of choice, or it might involve repairing relationships with your family of origin if that's possible and healthy. Whatever shape it takes, know that it is possible to break free from the limitations others have placed on you and to build a life that honors your authentic self. If my story has touched something in your experience, I'd love to hear about your own journey in the comments below. How have you redefined family or established boundaries that protect your sense of self? What helped you recognize your own worth when others couldn't or wouldn't see it? Like and subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength through adversity, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are worthy of respect and love, exactly as they are.